Hello and a very good afternoon. You're very welcome along to the first of our debates here for the Midlands Northwest constituency. For those who aren't aware, the constituency comprises the counties of Donegal, Cavan, Galway, Kildare, Leitrim, Longford, Louth, Mayo, Meath, Monaghan, Roscommon, Sligo and Westmeath, and the city of Galway. There are 5 seats with 27 candidates contesting, and we have 4 of them today. We'll hopefully speak to the majority of them who accept the invites over the course of the next 5 days. Right, we have our panel as invited, bar John Waters, non-party. We did make every effort to contact Mr. Waters with a view to inviting him onto the programme, but those calls went unanswered. Okay, so let's meet the candidates, and we'll say good morning. I'll literally just go with them as they appear on my paper here. Niall Blaney. Good morning to you, Niall Blaney from Fanadon, County Donegal, contesting for Fianna Fáil. Thank you so very much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Good to be with you.
I suppose we might just give each of you a minute or so, just really, I suppose, to set your stall out, what's important to you, why you believe people should vote for you. So whenever you're ready, Niall.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's important to keep our focus here. This is a European election, Greg, and Europe, there's the message I would really want to strongly deliver today. Europe really matters. Rather, it matters to everybody's everyday lives, new regulations coming in all the time, and all the things that we do in life. I would take first and foremost our infrastructure in Donegal, as well as the border counties into the west. We are not getting our fair share. And why is that important at a European level? We fought very hard back in the 90s to get Objective 1 status. It was delivered. Our 4 MEPs have not been advocating the Objective 1 status or the building of our infrastructure at a European level over the last term or two. That is not acceptable and it has to change. We are currently somewhere in the region of 214 or 218 out of 234 regions in the EU. We're at the very bottom of the pile, down with Romania. The south of the country is number 2. If we do not change what's happening here, we will continue to have a brain drain, will not attract the jobs that the East Coast and the South has. That is what Europe is about. It's about bringing regions in line with each other, about helping, supporting those regions that are worst off. We are seeing now that Ireland is a net contributor, but we still lag very, very far behind. That has to change. Secondly, in relation to farming.
Okay, you know what? We have time, so I'll go to 2 to 3 minutes, and I'll give everyone equal platform.
Okay. Secondly, in relation to farming. Farming has been the backbone industry of this part of the world, of the Midlands Northwest, for decades and decades. And unfortunately, nobody has the back of the farmer at the moment. And the only candidate in this border western region with hands-on farming experience and know-how. We need to stop sending celebrities to Europe and start sending people that are interested in our farmers and supporting them. The CAP has depleted over the last 10 years. The budget for CAP has depleted over the last 10 years. It cannot be allowed to continue. The derogation has been imposed, as we know, by the independents, including Luke Flanagan. That's on him and it's on those independents. But I will have farmers' backs if I get the opportunity to be that MEP in Europe. I will stand by them. I will work to ensure that we have a greater CAP and that derogation is extended beyond 2025.
Okay, well, listen, I mean, obviously...
There are, of course, another issues that I'll maybe come to
later.
But
we'll get to, of course, anything that anyone wants to talk to, we'll get to. And I suppose, the first couple of minutes, as much as possible, is for people to set out the stall. People can use that time as they wish. If it's to have a go at another candidate, so be it, preferably if they're on this call with us. But anyway, Michelle Smith, the business person from Armagh originally, lived in Mayo for over a couple of decades now, a former member of Sinn Féin. Michelle Smith, thank you so much for accepting our invite, and over to you for a couple of minutes. Why should people vote for you?
Hi, Greg. I'm just taking a breather after Niall's speech there, currently being in the Shannon, doing what I can see very little for the people of Donegal. But anyway, why I'm standing in Europe is very, very important to get this message across. I'm an award-winning tax consultant. I have huge experience across loads of different industries in this country. And I think it's very important now that someone working from grassroots and who is very passionate to help people on the ground. Now, Niall touched on farming. There's so much that has to be done for farmers. Calendar, red tape has to be moved. It could rain for 40 days here. It could be dry in Germany and Spain for 40 days, yet our farmers can't go out and farm their lands. They're getting blamed for the pollution in our waters. We have the third cleanest water in Ireland, and we have to stop being compared to the rest of the European Union. So I won't be going over there selling false promises. What I will be doing is going over as a strong voice and a stern voice to get the job done. Like recently, the tourism industry, especially here in the west of Ireland, the gross turnovers is dropping by 40%. So there's some big decisions. What I have found about sitting MEPs is they're not turning up. We have an attendance rate of 19th out of 29 member states. And what Niall was referring to, the infrastructure, that was a big meeting in the Radisson where his attendance was not present. We're actually 212th out of 232 lacking behind in the railways. So everything from the western side of this country right up northwest, we're being completely forgot about. Hospitals, etc. There's so much going on in this country. And the current MEPs, the party MEPs, have done very little in my eyes. And I am completely for farmers. Our fishermen, I'm a fisherwoman here. I fish in Knockmask. I will be attending the meeting in Killybegs on Wednesday night. And their fishing has reduced by 45% at the ports. And there was a new law introduced between EU and the UK there in January, and that's going to reduce the quota by another 15%. And people can notice this then when they go in and do their groceries. The price of their meats are increasing, the price of the fish is increasing, and this is only going to get worse. And Ukraine and Moldova have got an extra year now for duty-free imports and exports, which is going to keep inflation up, which is going to keep our prices up, and is just completely pulling the peep out of our farmers and our industry here. If you go onto the marine website, you'll see 85% of our vessels now are European that are fishing our waters. So this new law that has been introduced, there's just detrimental things that have happened.
Okay, Michelle, we're going to obviously, you know, we're going to speak extensively about fishing, and I think the audience, especially ahead of that meeting on Wednesday, you reference, will be interested in hearing people's views. Chris McManus, you're one of those sitting MEPs that Michelle's quite critical of in terms of poor attendance, and it seems to be not just locally but on a European level too, this thing that, you know, we elect someone and they disappear for 4 or 5 years. I know quite a number are using that. But anyway, you can reference that or do whatever you wish with the few minutes, Chris.
Thank you, Greg, and good afternoon to all your listeners. And I think that this election is an important one. I believe that change starts here, that if people want change, they have to vote for it. In these local and European elections and in the general election when it comes, because I think that voting for Sinn Féin on June the 7th will be the first step in getting rid of what is a disastrous government. They're taking place, these elections, at a time when Ireland is facing many challenges, 13 years of Fine Gael in government, supported by Fianna Fáil and the Greens, and it's left us with an ongoing housing emergency, a health service that's at breaking point, a broken immigration system, and a never-ending cost of living crisis. And I want to be re-elected to be able to continue the work that I've been at over the last 4 years. Contrary to the opening comments of Senator Blaney, I have consistently been raising the issue of regional imbalance. It's perceived that Ireland is a rich country in EU-wise, but we are 218 out of 234 in infrastructural terms. We've been called a development trap, lagging in transition, and I have prioritised these issues where possible so that we can build the infrastructure in the west and northwest that allows SMEs and innovators and other inward investors to be able to bring high quality and high wage jobs to our region. I also see it as important that we make as strenuous efforts as possible to reverse rural decline in regards to nature restoration law. Yes, we want to play our part, but we can't keep asking the farming community to do more for less, which was the reason I wouldn't support the nature restoration law, because there was no new funding available for farmers. Also, where possible, we would like to see the EU, and we realise that the issue of the defective blocks is primarily one for a Dublin government to address, but where possible to seek for the EU to continue to maintain pressure on the Dublin government to implement a fair 100% redress scheme. And also, as you said, and it'll be coming up, I presume, during the course of the discussion, to highlight the plight of our fishing communities, especially our coastal and island communities, and that we protect those, because too often they've been used as a bargaining chip by successive governments. Also, obviously, as an Irish Republican and as somebody who is travels around the border counties, indeed the wider Midlands, Northwest, on a continual basis since I've been an MEP, the need for the EU to be preparing for Irish unity is one that is very much forefront for me.
Okay, listen, thank you very much for that. And last but no means least, of course, Rory Hearne, who is running for the Social Democrats. Rory, lovely to have you on the programme. I'm not sure if we've spoke before or not. I don't believe we have. But thank you so much for accepting the invite, and I suppose ensuring that you unmute in advance. Could you outline why you think people of the northwest of Ireland should give you a vote?
Yeah, thanks a million. I'm delighted to be here and with you and your listeners. I am a lecturer in Maynooth University in County Kildare, and some of your listeners might be familiar with me. I've been highlighting the issue of housing in Ireland, the housing crisis, and for many years, and the homelessness and issues of evictions and rents. And indeed, I have linked in with people from Donegal and the Northwest in terms of the housing crisis in recent years, people who've contacted me directly, and I've supported in relation to people facing eviction from rental households, and also the issue of mica and pyrite and campaigns and people who've been working on that. Because fundamental for me, I believe, and I've highlighted in my research, that housing is a fundamental human need. It's a basic human right. It's what we all need to survive, but yet so many people across Donegal don't have access to that across the Northwest. And I looked at the figures there, and there's 18,000 young adults, and increasingly not so young, who are still living in the parental home just in Donegal alone, which is a shocking number. And when we look at the delivery of affordable housing in Donegal, there's not one either affordable rental or affordable purchase home delivered in Donegal last year. And my simple question is that to the people of Donegal, the Northwest, is: do you want to elect people who have demonstrated that they have not pushed the housing issue, done anything on it? Or are you looking for someone who has shown that they will stand up on housing and do whatever they can to promote the housing issue and ensure people have access to homes across this country?
We asked, thank you, Rory. We asked our listeners in advance to sort of highlight to us what they believe the reasons or what direction they'll vote. Obviously, we're going to talk about fishing in a moment. Housing is a huge one, no doubt about that. Tourism and all of that. Many of the issues actually end up coming under the roof of housing. And our first conversation, if you don't mind, is about defective concrete. And we all have a skin in the game. It's from Donegal down to Michelle in Mayo there. I'll start with you first, Niall. As a government rep, as well as your own being your own person and a European candidate, the current scheme that's in place, are you of the view that it is a fair scheme, a workable scheme, and the best scheme that's available right now?
Well, Greg, I'll put that up to the screen. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yeah, we see it. It's the cornerstones of a house just about to fall off.
That's my home. So if anybody knows about Micah, it's me. You had my brother on this morning, and he's the same situation as I am. So we know all about the pain of Micah. So what I'll say to you is this: the current scheme is not where it needs to be. But if it were not for the work of ourselves in Fianna Fáil, we would not be where we are today. And that's reality. We have fought night and day, worked day and day out with officials, Donegal County Council, Department, and government to get the scheme where it's at. No, it's not sufficient. Those with a house over 2,400, 2,500 square foot will not get 100% grant. But those up to that are most likely will, and there are examples of houses now being built 2,400 square feet and below being built. Is it happening quick enough, Greg? Absolutely
We
not.
heard from
It's
a caller
painstaking,
today with
pain-wrenching.
a 12,800 square foot house, and they're seeing a €45,000 shortfall.
I don't understand how that is. I can take you down 3 miles from where you are there today to a house 2,400 square foot, whereas it's up, the roof is on, it's getting 100% grant, and it's going to be finished with 100% grant. There's 50 houses complete, Greg, and there's 70 more on the way. And as I understand it, they're all 100% grant. I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty, Greg. All I'm saying to you is we know the pain, we know the difficulty. We're doing everything we can to make the scheme right. The next opportunity, there's been some changes this last week. Martin McDermott has outlined them. I'm not going to them now. The next opportunity for making that grant better is now in July, where there's opportunity of increasing the cap by another 10%. We are doing everything we can to work within government. And that's what we're in there for, Greg. We're the only party that put in our manifesto we'll take this on. We're taking it on. And I have done everything I could to keep this grant on track, and it has not been easy, as you know.
Chris McManus, your party, and listen, there's two things going on here. Firstly, by the way, I understand there's local issues and there's European issues and there's national issues, but this is a fight that has been taken to Europe, and the hope is that Europe can put pressure on Donegal, and Europe has commented on on Ireland to enhance this scheme, and there has been commentary in relation to that. So I do feel it falls quite nicely into the European issue as well. But Chris McManus, your party offering something completely different to Niall. Bells and whistles, 100% redress, everything paid for.
Yeah, Sinn Féin's commitment is we've stated quite clearly what it is. We want a 100% redress delivered by the state, for primary homeowners and those landlords who have won property. And I think that's a massive commitment. Both our local TDs, Pádraig McLaughlin and Pearse Doherty, are committed to that. And when you think about the potential that Pearse Doherty may be a future Minister for Finance, I think we can take that is a very strong endorsement of our commitment to it. I've listened to what Senator Blaney has said, and the bottom line is you're still not listening, in my opinion. I think what you're still suggesting is going to leave behind an awful lot of homeowners who can't access those tens of thousands of euros that they need.
What am I leaving behind? Which part am I leaving behind?
And the bottom line is all people want in Donegal and indeed in Mayo and in Sligo is a 100% redress scheme rolled out by the state on a like-for-like basis, same as what they got in Dublin and North Leinster. Otherwise, that shows again that we in the Northwest are no more than second-class citizens. And I've heard you talk, or I've seen on your posters, talk of putting Donegal back into Europe. Well, the government has ignored the Northwest and Donegal for years. And while you should have been Donegal's voice in Dublin, it seems to me and to an awful lot of people I would talk to in the Northwest and in your part of the world is that really you're just Dublin's voice in Donegal.
Can I respond to that, Greg, please? First of all, Chris, you've been asleep at the wheel in relation to this issue up until the last few months. Look, Mike Flanagan pushed it at EU level, but Europe can do nothing about this as regards to grant. But what you can do in relation to regulations and bring new regulations in, you failed to do anything on this in Europe. You've done nothing in relation to regulation in Europe. But can I address what you just said about myself? I spent my last 4 years working strong on this. 7 weeks in government, we introduced the scheme that the previous two governments talked about. In 7 weeks, as of last year, we reassessed the scheme, but a new scheme. It is not where we want it to be, but we're getting there. Your party had no, you didn't even have it in your manifesto the last election. And when it comes to passed legislation in the Houses of the Oireachtas, your colleagues, who are all talking different ideas and different monies, are aligned on this, Chris. All you had to do was come along with 2 pages of legislation and a private member's motion, and you put it right the way you feel it should be done, along the lines that you're after saying. But you didn't do that, Chris. And do you know why you didn't do it? Because if you did do that, you'd be caught for it on Fermanagh and Tyrone and Derry, where they're riddled with mica, and where you're doing absolutely nothing. So you're all talk and no action, Chris. And that's all Sinn Féin right throughout this. You had your opportunity to pass legislation and push legislation in Dublin. You have months stepped up.
Okay.
And Owen O'Brien was asked to contribute to the scheme on several occasions. Every party did to the new scheme.
Okay, we want to bring. I want to bring Michelle. Yeah, I want to bring Michelle and Rory into this conversation. But I presume, Chris, you'll want an instant response there, just, and then I'll come to you, Michelle, if that's okay. So, Chris, briefly, your response to that.
Well, our response to this is we are not the party in government. Fianna Fáil and Fianna.
What about it not being in your manifesto?
But you're in opposition. You can pass legislation.
Opposition.
Right. We'll go to Michelle. Listen, we'll go to Michelle now. Michelle, actually, before you get into the thrust of your points, if you don't mind, how big of an issue? Obviously, you know, defective concrete's widely talked about up here. It is effectively either you or someone you know is affected by it. Can you just give us a sense of where it ranks in voters' concerns in your area that's also affected?
Well, I'm pretty big on social media, if you don't know that already. And I am in communications with a fella called Sean, and he's highlighting an awful lot of issues. And there was a man a couple of weeks ago, he's in his 70s, his house is huge, and it's being demolished this week. He has nowhere to go. He has no communication with anyone, and he has no option of a roof over his head. Now, this is huge in Donegal, and I'm going to reiterate something. I have a screenshot here of the questions that Chris McManus asked in 5 years to go towards the commission, not one of them. Making fundamental rights to health and safety at work, how to tackle different things, health plans, legal protection, LGBTQ. So 5 questions in 5 years have been asked by Chris McManus to go towards oral questions in the European Parliament. So I will not sit here and listen to Sinn Féin's going to do this, Sinn Féin's going to do that. Sinn Féin has been in opposition and have done absolutely nothing. Where was the opposition? And where is the help for these people? You know what I mean? We can sit here and we can listen to absolute promises. You're going to do this and you're going to do that. I'm a cutthroat businesswoman. See people suffering here from the ground. Things coming up now about the grants for insulation. That's going to be a big problem if you followed a case in the UK using Kingspan materials. So this is what I do. I will speak for the people, but I will not sit here and listen to absolute bunyuk.
What do you think should be, what do you think whichever party's in power, and again, I really am conscious that this is not necessarily an EU issue, but I do know that people are very interested in the views, okay? So bear with me on this, and we'll get on to stuff that definitely has its roots in Europe. What do you think, Michelle, then, whatever government is in power, should put in place for the people affected by defective concrete?
Well, they should cover the costs of this, or if not, give them a chance to get an affordable home and even give them some sort of grant to get 90% of it. Like, people can't afford to leave their homes that are suffering from mica and go out and rent. There's no supply for the demand. So we know that's the thing. They could put up, where is their modular homes? You know what I mean? These houses are in sites. They could put a lovely wee 3-bedroom there, or a 2-bedroom, compared to their family, temporary until houses are rebuilt. But there's no brains, there's nothing between the ears with these parties, and there is money there. They made an extra 8.6 billion in the exchequer, and they're giving themselves a tap on the back. Whereas the people in this country are facing homelessness. Like, the only homeless figures that are registered at the minute are those in emergency housing. So they're touching on 13,000. There's over 30,000 people now that are homeless in this country, and 70% of them are renters. And a lot of people now that are facing their homes being demolished. And if you follow your man Sean Diver on TikTok, you'll see the amount of them. And I've spoken to them in Donegal, and they're complaining about Niall not being hands-on. Now, I do emphasize, I didn't know that his own house was affected, so I apologize for that. But, you know, they're in coalition, and people need to wake up. There's no leadership.
Okay, I'm sure both Niall and Chris will want a response, but I want to hear from Rory Hearne on this issue. Rory, I'm not, pardon my ignorance, I'm not sure what the Social Democrats' position on this particular issue is. So if you want to outline that or your own views, I mean, do you think there should be 100% redress? And we're not talking about the 2 or 3 bedroom families' homes just either. There are 15-bedroom homes that would also require to be fully 100% redressed. So, you know, what's your view?
Yeah, my starting point, and as a party, our starting point is people need to have a decent home and a decent standard of a home. And I've spoken to people, affected by, mica and pyrite, and it's absolutely horrific. The mental health, and I've spoken about this and wrote about it in my book Gaffs, specifically, around the issue of the mental health impact of living in housing that is falling down around you. That it's a trauma. It's an actual trauma. It's hugely impacting on children in particular, but older people, and it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable, the response from government to people who are affected. I think it's inadequate. I think there should be 100% redress. And I think that the issues that are outlined that I've pointed out before, in for example, around nobody should be having to leave their home into homelessness, and be that someone who's being evicted from the private rental sector, or someone who's in a situation of their house is literally unlivable because of mica and pyrite. And I think the government needs to do a proper response that doesn't just include the 100% redress, but does include measures like ensuring people have somewhere to go to, and where you have, situations of vulnerable people, we know people with disabilities, people with young children, elderly people who can no longer leave in their home, that alternative accommodation needs to be provided, and proper accommodation, not emergency accommodation. And I do think this is a European issue. And as you framed from the outset, Europe, and it's been put across from Fianna Fáil, for example, have said to me, a number of their, not Niall now, but other candidates who are running in this race, that housing isn't an issue in the European elections, in terms of it's not an issue that Europe should be addressing. That, but in actual fact, Europe does have a role. And when we look back and go, why are we in this crisis? We're in this crisis because Fianna Fáil and other governments very much allowed a market-led housing system, where there wasn't proper regulation. There wasn't proper regulation of what went into buildings. It was let the developers do whatever, let the builders do whatever. And we need proper regulation from Europe to ensure that no more of these type of housing is allowed to build, that there's proper regulation on what is being built, but also to ensure that nobody is put into homelessness. Europe has a commitment that no one should be homeless. So that needs to include people who are suffering from mica and pyrite as well.
Chris, I mean, obviously Niall believes, you're not doing much nationally, and Michelle says you haven't used your platform in Europe in the last 5 years to do much either.
I have to say, I find it incredulous that two of your panel, one of them a government representative, is somehow trying to, point in the direction of Sinn Féin, an opposition party. Like, the reality is that Niall is a member of a government party that has failed to, give commitments to the people of the Northwest of 100% redress, the same as what was given to the people of Dublin and North Leinster. In the recent EU report, which came from our political group, the Left, and which I partially sponsored along with others in the Left political group, I included an amendment in it to have the report to include 100% redress included in it. For some reason, all the EPP MEPs, which is Fine Gael's party in Europe, voted against it. Now, I presume they were under some form of direction from people within the wider Fine Gael group out in Europe. But I'll not sit here and take criticism as a member of an opposition party when the onus of responsibility lies firmly on the shoulders of the government for the
But
failure.
Michelle believes that you, and both Niall, Blaney, both believe that even in opposition you could be doing more, either in terms of legislation or indeed, directly raising the issues.
Well, we have been raising the issues, and we've given a commitment to the people of Donegal and the Northwest that if Sinn Féin are to lead government at the next general election, which I hope would be the case, that they will be we will be able to assure that there will be 100% redress, the same as people got in Dublin and North Leinster for the people of the Northwest. No more, no less.
Now, Blaney, do you believe
that's
as
far
far
as clearer for him? Can I make it a bit clearer for Chris? He didn't seem to pick it up right the last time. Sinn Féin have no policy document on 100% dress for people in Donegal or anywhere else, Chris. So let's start there and get the facts and stop spinning because I'm sick of the Sinn Féin spin. These are answers to everything and solutions to nothing. So, as far as Pat Midlothian is concerned, it's 100% dress, 100% redress. You have never been an attempt to pass legislation, and you don't have any manifesto advocating for the 100%, because really Sinn Féin doesn't believe in people owning their home. Sinn Féin wants everybody to live in rental. That's the reality of it, and that's the policy of your housing spokesperson in Dublin. And it's time people actually knew that. And this spin stops, because I'm sick of it, Chris.
Okay, well, let's just.
I like the way Niall is trying to.
It's
move.
really important. This point
no,
is finished.
Niall is trying
I've
to.
worked for the last 4 years.
Niall, please just let Chris make his point there.
From Sinn Féin.
Yeah, Chris.
I'm sick of the opposition.
All right, Niall.
When you start coming with something worthwhile, Chris, and something useful.
Okay, look, we're going to move on now shortly, but
useful to any of the legislation.
Chris, do you want to quickly respond, because we could be back and forwards all day?
This is sleight of hand by Fianna Fáil representatives trying to move the conversation away from what we're talking about. Is those affected by defective stocks? So look, I'm not going to sit here and listen to Niall Blaney, who would try to say that the current scheme is fit for purpose.
Rory,
as I said, Sinn Féin has said 100% redress.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Rory Hearne, I mean, obviously with your background as an author and interest, more generally speaking, what do you think of Niall Blaney's assessment of Sinn Féin's housing policy? Do you have a view on that they favour rental over? Although some people think that's a great idea, that we're too connected to home ownership here. Rory, do you have a view?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting comment, because if you look at the in terms of way policy has gone, I have analysed this at spent a long time researching this, and I teach on it specifically at university. And if we look at housing policy and what has happened over the last kind of 15 years, we had the huge boom which promoted home ownership, promoted the market, and then it led in large part to our financial collapse. And what happened during that boom, and people don't talk about it enough, that also was stimulated during that period of the Celtic Tiger boom, was the purchase of housing as an investment asset by not investor funds, but by middle class people, by small time, business people, whoever could get a bit of money from the banks. They bought multiple properties to rent out. And the whole creation of generation rent actually started back in 2003, 2004. And you had this emergence of people buying property as an investment asset. And I actually root the cause of our crisis back then, when we stopped building social housing and we turned housing into this asset. The issue of renters actually comes up. In 2016, it was Fine Gael, who led a policy, and unfortunately none of their candidates are here, but Fine Gael led the policy where they said that everybody, basically the younger generation in Ireland, will rent, and because we'll become more European, and people will rent. But what they didn't change was any of the policies that would allow renters actually have a quality of life when they rent. So they didn't give them lifetime protection of tenancies, so they still face the issue of eviction that other European tenants have. And they didn't control rents. They allowed rents increase massively. So actually, the real policy that we've seen over the last 8 years has been a policy that's promoted renting, not home ownership, but promoted a type of rental that has led to renters being completely squeezed and exploited. And what I would be in favour of, and what the Social Democrats are in favour of, is a rental called social housing, which is what we used to have, when people would have permanent security of tenure, and also then affordable housing that people could buy.
I get you. Okay, €2,400, I believe the average rent in Dublin is at the moment. And those same people probably actually couldn't go and get a mortgage to pay $1,200 on, which is crazy, isn't it? We're in the company of Niall Blaney of Fianna Fáil, Michelle Smith, who's a non-party independent, Chris McManus of Sinn Féin, and Rory Hearne, who you've just been listening to there from the Social Democrats. Michelle, as you mentioned, you're attending a meeting in Killybegs on Wednesday on the fishing industry, and there is a sense from people I speak to that really the policy is to really end fishing as an industry in Ireland, that really the priorities were, data centres and IT, and fishing is somewhere else altogether. As I say, I'm not saying that's a fact. That's the sense that some people would express on our morning programme. Michelle, how would you rate the current fishing industry, sort of the status of it, and where do we need to go?
Well, firstly, the processing at ports along Ireland has reduced now by 45%, which is a huge problem. And I touched on it earlier on. The new law between the EU and the UK in January this year will allow the UK to fish our waters freely now as well, which is going to reduce that quota again by another 15%. So I have some of my best friends are big fishermen down in Castletown Bar in Cork and Union Hall, right up to Killybegs. So I know them all personally, and I have assured them that I'll be a strong voice when it comes to Europe. But what we can do at the table in Europe is to try and remove some of this red tape that is going on and take back the majority control around the borders here in Ireland. Like, there's fishermen sitting across the country who are now sitting at home instead of being out at sea. Their costs are spiraled out of control. The introduction of carbon tax as well on the fuels has just gone crazy. And, from a local level, people that enjoy fish, the fishmongers, everybody who's involved in this, notice prices on their groceries every week going up, feeding their kids, and this is why. So at a European level now, we need legislation to identify that Ireland is being overfished by other European countries, and we should have a majority right ourselves to fish our own waters.
Yeah, not
and
just
UK
European,
well.
And Iceland and the Faroes, and okay.
It's a huge problem, Greg.
But why has it not happened up until now, Michelle? If it's just a case of campaigning, saying, look, we want better. I mean, the last time there was outside of sort of policies was Brexit, and a lot of Irish fishing rights were, I suppose, given away as part of those negotiations. Some might dispute that language. So it's the other direction we seem to be going.
Yeah, and we're going in the other direction for everything, our farmers as well. And it boils down to not having strong enough people in the EU with a backbone to actually stand up and fight for legislation for this country. Like, as I said, I have videos up on my social media of every single question that every sitting European MEP has asked. And Irish farmers are left behind, the fishermen are left behind, and basically the people of Ireland are being left behind. So we need strong control back now, and we need to cut the crap. Like, I've had this out with Niall before in Galway when I said, I don't think it's of any beneficiary to be part of a party when you're going to Europe, because you have to align with another party. So you're under a policy and a whip here, and then when you go out there, you're joining another European party. So that's essentially two different groups that you're aligning with. So I think it's very important to be a very, very strong voice and align with people over there who are in the same mind of thinking. But more importantly, who are going to show up. You know what I mean? Now, each party candidate. Now, Niall is in one of the top 10 spenders, along with Chris, on social media for advertising at the minute. And I don't have that budget. But if you can waste up to €200,000 per candidate on a campaign, and the sitting MEPs can't do their job, then they're the ones I'm out to target now at the minute, because they need to leave.
I mean this slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I think if Niall or Chris had 44 million views on TikTok, they might not be spending the money.
The only reason I have them views, Greg, is because I'm a strong businesswoman.
Yeah. No. You have to work hard for that stuff. I trust Niall. Niall Blaney.
But I'm also out on the road every day meeting people. I've went into every business and every time that I've been, and the same thing. The Irish Times poll is so out of touch at the minute, because everybody that I'm meeting, and every business owner and every person on the street, they want change and they want it now, and they're not going down the line with party people anymore, especially for MEPs.
The polls have been out quite significant in quite variance as well too. Now, what did you want to come in on there?
Yeah, well, I suppose I agree with some of what Michelle said. I don't have business interests. I'm not on the road for my own self-interest. I'm on the road every day since the 1st of April 2023 on this campaign, meeting people throughout all the counties.
Well, Niall, I'm on the road 9 years.
I'll let you speak for not a long time, Michelle. I never interrupt you.
That's okay. But I'm not doing this for money, so thank you.
Because I'm also an elected representative, and I have been for quite a number of years, Michelle. So I don't know who you represent other than being a candidate. And, you know, I think maybe how our candidates are allowed run for the European need to be looked at as well. There were 28 candidates in this election. Well, but back to the farming and the fishing. Yeah, fishermen have had a really bad time of it since Brexit, Greg. Quotas is badly hit. The processing at the ports is a real problem. I was down last week in Maharorty. I met fishermen about the landing of fish there, or the inability to be able to land there. It's a major problem. And Michelle's right in one thing. Since Pat the Cope left the EU, we don't have an advocate in relation to fishing, and nobody has the farmers back. That has to change.
Though you are in an advantage, though, aren't you, Niall, in that your director of elections is the minister for the marine. So I mean, you have really
you've got decide the cap budget. He has to work with what is given from the EU.
Really?
But that's where an EU voice is really important.
So is that we just take what we're given?
No, that's what our MEPs is for, Greg. To go over there and fight for us, to have their voice heard, not sit around the table and say nothing, or not be there at all, or do nothing in farming or fishing, other than the odd time speak up on something to advance yourself or your party. So as far as I'm concerned, fishermen and farmers need someone that has their back. We're not getting our fair share over there, and that has to change.
Okay.
From the point of view of climate change, Greg, if we want to really affect climate change, we have to work with our farmers, and they will work with us.
We're going to do farming separately. Yeah, we're going to do farming separately. Go ahead, finish your point, though. I'm not trying to mute anyone.
What farmers don't get value for is what happens on a farm day in, day out, in the absorption of carbon. People in their houses that leak emissions through no fault of their own. That's the way regulations were. The emissions release, farmers, there's emissions released on farming, but the land is capturing it every day, and they're doing measures. 90% of farmers are actually in environmental measures. They're doing far more than they get credit for, and there has to be a level up of that playing pitch at a European level that has to be
again. Your director of elections is the Minister for Agriculture.
He's not an MEP. Right?
Okay, I get you.
He's dealing with the budget here.
Understood.
Not in the EU.
Rory Hearne. You know, I mean, obviously you're fully aware fishing a huge issue up here. A lot of people again feeling, and I don't want to come across as if I'm making a particular one-sided argument. It's just really to set up a point of view, but that, you know, we need to do something because we've already missed a generation here potentially of new people to work in the industry, and you know, if we don't do something really soon, it is a sunset industry. What's your views on it? Maybe, you know, there are those that feel that we should focus elsewhere other than fishing.
Yeah, I think we have to acknowledge, and this is where I probably would differ from all of the others, that you know, climate change is the biggest issue facing us as a species. We're you know, in existential threat in terms of if we don't make changes fast enough, we are in danger, as the scientists are explaining very clearly, that we are going to make this planet uninhabitable for the human species, for human beings, in terms of the huge changes that are potentially, if we don't keep, you know, radically reduce our emissions, radically reduce what we're doing. And that also extends to nature itself and the ecosystem. And fisher people would be very much aware of that in terms of the issues of overfishing, what it leads to. And I think that just as with farmers, there is increasing understanding that the way things have been done up to now need to change. And what I would say is that in terms of the Social Democrats, that, and myself, is that what we're about is ensuring people have a decent quality of life, a decent standard of living, but also then supporting to make the changes that are necessary.
Okay, before you move on and before I bring Chris in, Michelle, you're shaking your head there. I mean, a lot of the overfishing, I would have thought, in our waters is not actually, we could fish a fraction of that and have a very successful fishing fleet. But Michelle, you wanted to come in on Rory there a second?
Yeah, look, we all would love this sunflowers, rainbows and lollipops type life. We would. but we all enjoy to eat our dinner and our lunch and our suppers and feed our kids. And without our farmers and without our fishermen, how are we going to do that?
But
You
who
know,
has said
we need
anything about
some.
getting rid of farmers or fishermen?
But if you're coming at the idea with the quality of life and coming at it at a totally different angle and focusing on climate change, whereas the backbone of our society at the minute in Europe is being completely forgot about. We need people to fight for our fishermen and farmers first. There's innovations, there's different things that we can do at an eco level while working with them. We can bring in the likes of aquaponics. 2% of our energy is on the grid from water. Like, if we don't have strong people to recognize that and say, okay, well, let's work with the farmers, work with the fishermen, bring in innovations. You know what I mean? It
That isn't even
has to
just
be
about
common
that.
sense.
It's about quotas as well, Michelle. We've lost a
Yeah,
lot of quotas since Brexit, and even before that. And since we've lost
absolutely.
that voice about the copes at the EU level, nobody is advocating for the fishermen. We've
Okay.
lost that voice
Exactly.
in Europe, and
Chris,
nobody's
And I
trying to
agree with Nell on that.
And,
I
and, and
agree with
relation,
Nell
in relation, just
100%
quickly in
there.
relation to farming, you know, the farmers are the ones that has protected our environment over the years. They want to work to make it better, but let's stop battling them for it. They're not
Yeah.
responsible for all that's happening out there. If we actually have their backs, they will work with us and do much more. But they're not responsible for everything that's going on.
Yeah, but
and
the,
we
but I
need a
mean,
fair deal
but then
stop the blame game.
we do have us accepting effectively. I think there might have been a Zoom call just ahead of the most latest nitrate directives, whereby the great inroads in many areas of this county in terms of improving water quality by the farmers. Firstly, there's some feel the argument wasn't made strongly enough on their behalf at the time. I think it was at the start of this year, and for good practice, you don't actually get rewarded. I.e., there are some that feels Charlie McConnell should have actually gone over and made that argument rather than it being thrashed out over a Zoom call.
Can I come in there? Like,
well, I just want to give Niall an opportunity to respond. Chris, yes, go in, Chris. Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, and I appreciate that, and you know, the one thing I just want to say, it's aside from, it's a comment that came up earlier from one of your panelists who they're targeting or questioning attendance, and I just want to put on the record, because I don't want people coming off this show saying anything, knowing anything any different. There's been 18,450 votes in the European Parliament during my time of 4 years. I've missed 29 of them. That gives me a 99.83% attendance record in that regard. So I don't know where other people are getting their stats from. Those are the stats that there are. Look, I am very committed.
I get my stats of the European Parliament, Chris.
Okay.
So, yeah, but you used an average, Michelle. Chris, it wasn't a specific figure to you. I think Michelle used an average. Go ahead, Chris.
That's right, 99.83%. So we'll stop throwing that one over at me, please, Michelle. Look, we in Sinn Féin are very committed to standing up for our fishing and coastal and island communities. The very first group I brought over to the European Parliament when we were able to post-COVID was the leaders of the fishing industry, to be able to make the case directly to the commissioner, the PESH commissioner, which is the fisheries commissioner. We want to see a continuous engagement, because what we've had is basically every time there's a negotiated process or any form of discussions that are going on, it's the Irish fishing sector that gets thrown under the bus, and we've seen that most recently during the outgoings of the Brexit negotiations, where the inshore fishermen are under massive pressure. And the first thing we need to say, the first question you need to do, Niall, is look within government. The fact that we don't have a dedicated ministry for fisheries, that it seems to be a bit part job or a hobby for the existing Minister for Agriculture, who just after hearing Greg saying is your Director of Elections, you know, speaks volumes in regards to where it has been prioritised. You know, I've had met recently with Muireann Kavanagh, you know, from Arranmore, a 14-year-old who's looking out her window at super trawlers sucking up all that they can, and she's not allowed to go out with 2 lines.
First time I've heard you advocating for that, and your time there, that was the first time I heard you advocating for fishing, Chris.
You need to go back over my record, Niall, if that's the case. Look, Niall.
Well, Chris, sorry, in your record of oral questions in the European Parliament, you've asked nothing.
Niall is
typical,
you know, government, you know.
Well, I'm not, and I'll tell you straight out. And for the listeners here, you can go onto European Parliament, click on current MEPs, click on Chris's name, click on oral questions, click on plenary debates, and you will find how many things that you have taken part in. It's all well and good sitting there and pressing a button, but if you're
Okay, well,
not going to
just
take
directly
part in debates and
outside of Maureen, how many times have you spoke about fishing in your 5 years?
Michelle was attacking me in my attendance, and she said that was incorrect. I'm coming back to the government. The government.
Just in relation to Chris, Michelle never made any personal reference to your attendance. Michelle at the beginning talked about general attendance, so she's never actually questioned your attendance, unless I've missed that, Chris. But anyway, continue.
No, but as I say, we in Sinn Féin want to be very strong advocates. I want to see somebody like Pádraig McLaughlin as a dedicated Minister for Fisheries, because I know from talking to people in the fishing community, the fishing sectors, that they know that he will be a very powerful and strong advocate.
Sure, we can all go and talk to them and have a wee cup of tea.
Sorry, excuse me, Michelle. I've never interrupted you. Okay? Please.
I know, but how long do you expect people to listen to this, Chris? You know, where has been your action in the 5 years? Where has been your voice? That's a genuine question.
Hold on, Michelle. You didn't even listen to what I said. The very first group of people I brought out to the European Parliament was the leaders of the fishing industry to talk directly to the Fisheries Commission. You know, the very first group of people I brought out.
So I'm going to ask you again, out of your 5 oral questions in 5 years, where have you punched towards the Commission?
Chris, can you just answer that? Can you just answer that one, and then we can put that to bed?
No, well, obviously, Michelle doesn't have an understanding of how the Parliament works. Oral questions are a very small part of what we do.
Yeah, and preliminary debates are a big one as well.
I have raised on the Parliament floor on a number of times the issues of fisheries and the impact and the devastation that's been caused.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Can you just come on there, Greg?
Very briefly, because I want to hear from Rory as well here.
I think this is really important, because this really points to where we're at. As in the backwater of Europe, and we're so far behind infrastructure-wise and the rest of it. Chris, you have failed in representing fishermen. You're talking about taking fishermen over to represent their interests. Patrick Hope never had to take the industry over. He represented the interests when he was there as an MEP. That's what he's an MEP for. Yourself and Michelle Gilton, you running as an absentee MP, now wanting to be an MEP. Will she continue the same record? She goes to Europe as she has.
Okay. Well, listen, we come back and forwards. I think it's.
We need to be very smart about who we elect here.
Again, Niall Blaney is at this kind of pointing in a different direction and trying to call the people who are listening to this show. Here's the bottom.
Anybody, Chris?
Here's the bottom line.
Just let Chris respond, please.
Is the government speaks volumes when they don't have a dedicated Minister for Fisheries. And especially when it's supposed to be under the remit of a minister.
Rory, do you want a final word on? Thanks, Chris.
Fisheries industry.
Thanks, Chris. Do you want a final? Rory, do you want a final word on this before we switch topics?
Yeah, just to say that, like, the Social Democrats, we support a sustainable fishing industry, and we would absolutely support that, and I would support that going to Europe. And I think it's really important that we do talk about the need for investment in a sustainable fishing industry, but also that the children of, fishermen and women and the communities, they all need investment in infrastructure, whether that's housing, community facilities, jobs, employment. And, that's what I would stand up for. And that's what the Social Democrats are about.
Okay. Michelle Smith, you have spoke at demonstrations in the past as it relates to plans to accommodate 50 male asylum seekers. So obviously this is an area of politics that you're interested in. We've just had the EU Migration Pact agreed as well. This is, of course, another EU issue. What is your stance? What do you think of this country's stance, and where do you think we should actually be on this matter?
I think from the majority of people that I'm meeting now in every rural town, it's the first thing that's put at me. Where do you stand when it comes to immigration? And I think the government have really, really let us down. I know there's no Fine Gael representatives here, but Simon Harris coming out and saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that.
Can I just make one comment on that? Sorry, we don't have enough Fine Gael representatives to go around all the debates, because I know Chris mentioned that as well.
That's okay. But if I can make this
continue with your point, Michelle, please.
Yeah, he's now Taoiseach, okay, in a coalition government. And when he was the Justice Minister in 2023, he was asked, why is the Dublin 3 regulation not being implemented, which is there as an EU policy to take out anybody in the country who has already been assessed in another country. And 3 people in his time as Justice Minister were sent back. Now we fast forward. I done a report there in February, and there was an average about 53 people coming into the country a day, not Ukrainians, before anybody starts about the Ukraine war, different nationalities. Now, onto IPAS figures, last week, there's now 87 people coming into the country a year, and that's going to surpass the 30,000, not where they initially said 13 to 15,000 coming in. And my problem is we don't have resources. Now, my dad passed away with motor neurons 9 years ago, and we got home help 3 days before he died. We couldn't get a hospital bed for him because he was over 6 foot. And if you bring in an influx of people that are going to be stretching on resources, housing, school places, like the country is literally to its knees. The tourism sector is being completely affected by this. Now, around here, I have clients that have restaurants and cafes, and their gross turnover has reduced here by 40%. Before COVID, I had 6 people working for me. Now I've 1. Why? Because it's the decisions that are being made by this coalition government. And it's a real problem. Now, I have been very vocal on this. I was the 1 person out of 3,000 in the town here to actually have the courage to take the mic. But at that time, there was only 600 people in tents. Now we have thousands. We have no border control. We have no stern, strong people to sit in a room with others and say, right, the UK are laughing at us. The rest of the world is laughing at us. Why? Because
So what
we have
would
no
you
leadership.
do? What would you do then to stop? What would you do to stop then migrants coming across the border? They're travelling from Britain now to escape the Rwanda plan into Northern Ireland and crossing the border into the Republic in great numbers. And there's been some.
And some of them now.
So what would you
Greg,
do
some
about
of them
that?
now are actually bypassing the UK now. They're coming straight here.
But what would
So
you
we're
do
seeing,
about it?
well, we need some sort of border. Plain and simple. Now, I grew up in the north. Before people come on here and say, no, we can't have borders, we can't have this. We need some sort of control.
But
And
the
we
irony
do.
of a border on the island of Ireland after all the rows with Britain to ensure that didn't happen?
Yeah, we do.
Okay,
and look,
Rory,
Greg, I grew up, I've seen bombs, I've seen
I'll come back
shootings,
to you
I've
now.
seen my car being stripped
I
at the
get you.
border. I know exactly what it's like to go through
Understood.
that.
Right.
But unless we have even a temporary situation to try and send a clear message that, you know, we're sending back
all right,
those
in the
who should
absence
not
of
be there.
in the absence of a border plan, would you join the Rwanda plan as offered by Rishi Sunak?
No, I would.
Okay.
The Rwanda plan is a bit, you know, I know these people are human too.
Okay, Rory,
You know.
Rory Hearne, what's your view on immigration, our policies, what we need to do, if anything?
Yeah, I think that the starting point for me is that we need to change how we're all talking about this issue. I think that the language we're using and or some people are using is really worrying and very negative. Immigrants and asylum seekers are human beings. They are human beings like all of us. They have families, they have kids, they have their individuals. And like all of us, they want to live a decent life. I am involved in a group called Sanctuary Runners, which involves those who are living in direct provision in social activities, and we organize running with them. And there's a number of these individual males that are being pointed out as being such a threat to us all that I've become good friends with. Both of them are working. You go to any of the direct provision centres, the absolute majority of people who are there are working. Michelle talks about she can't get carers, can't get trolleys in the hospital. 40% of our doctors are migrants. Carers increasingly, it's migrant workers who are working there. You know, we've the conversation all wrong about this.
And can I come in there? Like
And
700.
hang on a minute. I didn't interrupt you, Michelle. Thanks,
That's
if you
okay.
don't mind. There is real frustration that people have over the lack of housing, the lack of healthcare, and we need the answer to that is to build homes. It's to invest in hospitals. It's not to turn that anger and frustration onto the most vulnerable people in this planet, which is what is being done. And so the approach to migration that I would take is one that is humane, that treats people's human rights, but that ultimately we focus on the real issues that are affecting people, which are issues like housing and health.
Yeah, they're all intertwined, no doubt. Okay, that is the voice there of Rory Hearne. I just want to bring Chris in first, if that's okay. So I want to make sure that I'm not leaving anyone last every time inadvertently. In relation to, I think it's your stance on the Migration Pact, or the way you voted. I think it's probably one of the most misrepresented. But then it can be quite hard to find exactly who voted and what elements they did and didn't vote in between that and the nature restoration plan and what have you. But anyway, Chris, what's your position?
Well, just in general, in regards the wider issue of immigration, I think it's it's become very, very clear that the three government parties are very much out of their depth. They're lurching from one crisis to another, whether it's a broken migration system, but to the housing emergency, the health service, the never-ending cost of living crisis. Look, it's a government that's out of ideas, and it's very much one that's out of energy. You asked in regards to the EU Migration Pact. Well, we come from a position, Sinn Féin, where what we want to see is a system that is fair, efficient, and enforced. And if we are in government, we will address that issue with urgency. Regarding the EU Migration Pact, for me, it was very clear that the vast majority of measures contained within the EU Asylum and Migration Pact were not in Ireland's interests. We in Ireland can create a better, fair, efficient system if we exercise our opt-outs from a majority of the Pact's proposals. We need to ensure that we oppose opting into measures that aren't helpful and that would see basically the EU overstep its remit into areas that are of Irish sovereignty.
Niall, you wanted to come in there?
Yeah, I would like to hear more of what Chris has advocated for at the EU level, what he's pushed and what his policy is over there. I'll be the first to admit that our government is at sea in relation to migration, Greg. I've been calling it out for quite some time. First time I called it out was a little over a year ago when I used the example with the Roddy Garment or Parliamentary Party and told them the example of Milford where the 3 GP services full, two national schools are full, two secondary schools are full, the national school was full. We're now going to a situation where lots of our towns in Donegal are full, and any of those come in through the iPass system can't get a GP, can't get schools, and they're going directly with health issues to the accident and emergency. That's driving the sentiment, and I hear what Rory said, and I'm not anti-immigrants, but what we're doing is actually driving anti-immigration sentiment. And what I've asked is that the Taoiseach actually admit that this is a crisis and set up a task force. We need a task force to identify the towns that are full and either provides the funds that Leo Varadkar promised us last year for those towns that are full, and we haven't had a penny yet. Either provides those funds.
Well, I think he was told. I think he was told that can't be actually administered. It was announced.
Sorry, Greg. Say that again.
I believe he was told that as announced could not be administered. It was impossible. 20 million, I think it was for the most.
Well, we need to take responsibility for the schools and the hospitals and the health services that are impacted, and all those vulnerable people that's been hit first, the disabled, the elderly. We're sick of it in Donegal, Greg. If I'm honest about it, people are sick of it. They're not anti-immigrants. They're anti it impacting our services and no response in relation to it. We're taking far more than our share, and that's the problem.
Okay.
And that's where it's driving anti-immigration sentiment.
Listen, I wish we had a ton more time. I appreciate all of your time so far. Just finally, Rory, I suppose, what is your message to the electorate, either listening and watching to this live or the many that will catch up on it later on when they're back from work or what have you and watch it on their tellies or however they choose to digest it? What's your message to the voters, Rory?
Yeah, I am someone who has stood up on the housing issue for almost 10 years, researching, writing about it, developing solutions, and also campaigning on it against evictions, for public housing, for real solutions to the housing crisis. If you elect me as MEP, I will continue to push for that at a European level, push the Irish government on it, but also as a social democrat, I will push for investment in communities, which we know the Northwest is completely starved of. I think what we need to do as a country and across Europe is to work on things that bring people together rather than dividing us through hate. And we need to look at how we create cohesive societies that work together and support people, support nature, and support peace. So I look forward to your support on June 7th. Thank you.
Rory, thanks so much for your time. Niall Blaney, your final message to the electorate.
Yeah, well, I'm very strongly of the opinion that we need people in Europe that are politicians. We need to stop sending celebrities that don't have any background in politics and don't know how to deliver projects. We need to ensure that we come out of the backwater that we're currently in. We have to build our infrastructure, and if we don't, the brain drain will continue. And it starts here and now. We start sending people that's responsible, that knows how to deliver projects, that knows how to build our infrastructure, and get our jobs into this region. And someone that has the knowledge and the backs of the farmers and the fishermen. And, you know, we can keep sending independents that don't belong to a group. And for me, that's a complete waste of time. We've done well in Europe in the past and other areas because we know how to build relationships and with our groups. Over there, as a lone voice, is just, you have no clout at a European level. And that's not a slight at Michelle. I'm just putting the point straight.
All right. Chris, you've been a bit of a lightning rod for stuff today. I hope you don't feel hard done by. You're well fit for it, I'm sure.
Absolutely not. As I said,
your final word to the electorate.
I expect nothing less from a government representative, and as I said, I don't really know who or what Michelle represents, but fair dues for putting her name in as an independent. Look, I've spent many years as a councillor in Sligo, and the issues that were raised to me there have now just been basically amplified for me as my time as an MEP for the last 4 years, over 13 counties, and those issues, as I said, they haven't changed. It's regional imbalance, and I pity we didn't get into a conversation about it. You know, Donegal has very much been a forgotten county, and I hear Niall talking about it. His government has failed to put the Atlantic Economic Corridor in to be able to seek funding under the 10T core network. An opportunity totally lost. One of
D5 wouldn't to go, Chris.
Sorry, Niall.
One second, Niall.
10T's ready to go. You're
all right, Niall. This is Chris's opportunity here. Yeah, go ahead.
This just speaks volumes of the arrogance of the Fianna Fáil representative.
Back to the facts, Chris. I won't bother you.
Oh, it's, hasn't the ability to just to mind himself and let others speak when they haven't. So look, bide your time and sit in your hands there, and I like the government have been doing for the last number of years, and let me have me speak. Look, I want to continue articulating on the issues of rural decline and standing up for our fishing and farming communities. And it's a pity again we didn't get a conversation about our agri sector. We're going through a housing crisis, a broken health service, and Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael don't care. And look, the bottom line is that something needs to change. We in Sinn Féin believe we can be that change, that we will be that change, and we have MEPs who will stand up for Ireland, especially around the other area we didn't get talking about, which was one of our neutrality that the government wished to sell out. So I'm saying to people, vote Sinn Féin at both the local and European elections on June the 7th.
All right, Chris, I'll take your point. It's hard to get to everything. It really is. Michelle, last but not least.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on both Niall's comment first. So I am an independent woman, but I'm also an award-winning business owner, and I have 9 years experience as a sole trader, but I've also studied corruption in social, economical and political dimensions. So if you think that I'm going to be a voice that doesn't know what they're doing out there, you have another thing coming. But I appreciate you don't know me. And yes, I am not a celebrity, but I'm a hard worker. And to Chris, what I stand for, I've grew up in the country my entire life. I am totally in touch with the farmers and the fishermen and the housing crisis. I have people that I love being evicted here and I can't help them. So I might be an independent, but as I said, you have to go over there and you have to align with another party and you have to be a strong voice and you have to be a stern one. I love working with people. I have won awards because clients have put me in that position, and I will bring that experience to the table in Europe. But I don't want people going in there thinking, oh, she's ditzy or she's a blonde, whatever. I have earned where I am in this world because I've worked my absolute back end off for the people in this country. So I mightn't have been at a political table, but if you put me in Europe, I will be a very strong voice, and I will work with the other MEPs, because at the end of the day, I am a businesswoman and I have to make some really hard decisions at the minute for businesses that are closing. I have helped businesses grow here, and I have helped businesses stay afloat. So I am very experienced in a lot of other industries in this country.
Michelle.
And just because I'm 38, you know, I will be a strong voice. So thank you for having me on the show as well.
Just because you're 38?
Yeah.
Do you mean because
Yeah.
is that old or young? I want to know how old or young to feel.
A lot of people are saying, well, you're quite young and inexperienced. I have so much life experience, it's not even funny.
Listen,
I have Crohn's disease. I have autoimmune conditions. I know what it's like.
Understood.
I have
I
never
get
got
you.
one penny off the state. My son, he's 21. He's an entrepreneur now because I think it's very important
I
to
get you.
invest in our youth.
Okay.
So I will be a strong voice.
Thank you, Michelle. Niall, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Greg.
I appreciate your time. Chris, thanks very much. I appreciate your
Greg,
time
and
too.
Good
All right.
afternoon to your listeners.
Good afternoon.
Thank
Okay,
you.
take care. Bye-bye, everybody. Okay, that was the first of our debates. And we have, firstly, on the show tomorrow morning after 10 o'clock, we have our second local election debate. This morning's one, I think, went very well in terms of getting to know the candidates. I really wasn't getting the buzz on it. But listening to them speak and the exchanges, it got my interest going, no doubt about that. And also to after 12 o'clock, 12:15 to 1:15, 1:30, depending on the amount of candidates, we return with our second EU debate. But for me, Greg Hughes, and all of the team, chat you tomorrow on the 9 till noon show from 9 o'clock, and rejoin us here exclusively online for the next Northwest. I still want to call it the Connacht Ulster, but it's not that anymore, of course. Midlands Northwest EU